Ryan Building, New York City, 1946. 10 a.m., and Bill McDonough wanted a cigarette. He had a pack of smokes calling to him from his jacket pocket, but he held off. He was right bloody nervous about this meeting with Andrew Ryan. He was sitting literally on the edge of the padded velvet waiting room chair outside the door of Ryan's office, trying to relax, his report on the tunnel in a big brown envelope on his lap. Bill glanced at Elaine, working diligently at her desk, a sturdy brunette in a gray-blue dress suit. She was about 29, a self-contained woman with snappy blue eyes, and that upturned nose that reminded him of his mom. But the jiggle when she shifted in her seat, that sure wasn't like his bony old mum. He'd watched Elaine walking about the office whenever he could do it, discreetly. She had slightly wide shoulders and hips, long legs, one of those leggy American women like Mary Louise, but smarter, judging from the brief contact he'd had with her. Bet she liked to dance. Maybe this time he'd get up his nerve and ask her. Bill made himself sit back in the seat, suddenly feeling weary. He was still knackered from staying up past midnight supervising the night crew in the tunnel, but he was glad for the work. He was making far more money than he'd ever made before. He'd moved up to a nicer flat on the west side of Manhattan after the first month working for Ryan, and he was thinking of buying a car. The work was sometimes like plumbing writ large, but the gigantic pipes in the tunnel project weighed tons. Maybe he should talk to Elaine. Ryan didn't respect a man without enterprise. Didn't matter what the enterprise was in. Bill cleared his throat.
Slow day, innit, Elaine?
She looked up, as if surprised he was there.
Oh, yes, it has been a bit slow.
She looked at him, blushed again, bit her lip, and looked back at her paperwork. He was encouraged. If a woman blushed looking at you, that was a good sign.
Things are slow, eh? Gotta make 'em briskier, I always say, and what's briskier than the jitterbug?
She looked at him innocently.
Jitterbug?
Yeah, fancy a jitterbug sometime.
You mean you'd like to go dancing?
She glanced at the door to Ryan's inner office and lowered her voice.
Well, I might. I mean, if Mr. Ryan doesn't. I'm not sure how he feels about employees who cut a rug?
Bill grinned. All quite harmless?
Harmless.
Ah, Bill, you're here. Andrew Ryan was at the door to the inner office. He seemed cheerful.
Almost ebullient.
Right you are, sir? Bill mumbled. He got up, trying to catch Elaine's eye as he went. She was studiously back at work. I expect you've brought the report, Ryan said, looking at Bill's manila envelope. Good man, but I already know how it's going. Tell you what, let's skip the office meeting. You and I, Bill, if you're up for it, are going on a trip. Couple of stops, one in town and one far beyond town. We'll talk about it on the way. It was Bill's first ride in a limousine. A smooth, quiet ride, a world away from the traffic outside, but Bill felt out of his social depth. He'd had only a few meetings with Ryan since being hired. He'd been working mostly with contractors, and sometimes with Greavy when the engineer was back from the North Atlantic. Only it had seemed to Bill like Greavy came out to the site mostly to watch him, like the boffin was trying to guess his weight. One time, Greavy had brought a couple of bearded, scowling Irishmen in fancy suits to look him over. Brothers by the name of Daniel and Simon Wales. Greavy never did bother to explain what that was about.
When you get a chance, take a deco of the figures, sir, Bill said. You'll see we're caught up on the schedule, and just about done.
Ryan held up a hand to stop him, but he was smiling faintly. I'm not surprised you're almost finished, Bill. In fact, the crew can finish without you at this point. That's why I hired you. I knew you'd do a good job. Greavy was testing you on this tunnel assignment, but I had you figured right along. There's something else I need to know, something far more important, Bill.
Yes, sir?
Bill waited, fascinated by the electric charge of sheer certainty that seemed to shimmer around Andrew Ryan. Ryan looked at him seriously. I need to know if you're ready to meet the greatest challenge of your life.
Oi.
Bill swallowed. Whatever Ryan had in mind, he had to be equal to it.
Anything you want to throw at me, sir. I'll take it on.
Bill? Ryan leaned forward, glancing at the chauffeur to make sure the window to the front seat was closed, and he spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Have you heard of something called the North Atlantic Project?" Bill couldn't suppress a chuckle. "Heard those 4 words and not a word more. They're all like monks with a vow of silence when I ask what it is." Yes, and for several good reasons. Reasons like the United States government, the OSS, British intelligence, Soviet intelligence. OSS, that's American spies, yeah? When I was with the RAF, we'd get a report on those blokes from time to time. Right, the Office of Strategic Services, he snorted. We run rings around them, and the FBI, I can tell you. The bonhomie faded from his eyes, replaced by a hard glitter as he looked sharply at Bill. You fought in the war. Tell me a little bit about it. It wasn't something Bill liked to talk about any more than he had to. Not so much on the fighting end, more like support. On-board radio man for the RAF. Never had to kill a man personally. 11 bombing missions over Germany after I was wounded. They found me a place in the Royal Engineers. Liked that better. Got my schooling. Did you feel a great loyalty to the government you fought for? Bill sensed this was a key question. Wouldn't put it that way, sir. Wasn't loyal to the government, never liked them. It wasn't who I was for, it was who I was against. I was against the bloody Nazis. The bastards bunging flying bombs at London. Ryan nodded gravely. He made eye contact, and Bill felt the voltage of it. My feelings about loyalty, Ryan said carefully, are very particularized. I believe a man must be loyal to himself first, but I also look for men who believe what I believe. Men who believe it enough that they know that being loyal to me is being loyal to themselves. Men like you, I hope. Bill was moved. This man, one of the world's most powerful, was opening yet another door to him, and at the same time acknowledging him as an individual. Yes, sir. I believe I understand. Do you? Of course, I run a corporation, and I ask for cooperation from people under me, but self-interest is at the root of cooperation, Bill. I intend to prove that self-interest oils the wheels of business, and that freedom from the tentacles of government, from the usual social shackles on science and technology and growth, will produce unstinting prosperity. I have envisioned a great social experiment, but Bill, ask yourself, where can a social experiment on a large scale take place? Where in this world is there a place for men like us? My father and I fled the Bolsheviks, and where did we end up? This isn't the land of the free. It pretends to be. It's the land of the taxed, and it was his reluctance to pay taxes that put my father in jail. Every society is the same on the face of the earth these days. But Bill, suppose it were possible. His voice pitched low, breathless, to leave the face of the earth. Just for a time, just for a century or two, until the fools have destroyed themselves with their Hiroshima bombs. Bill was flummoxed. Leave it, sir. Ryan chuckled. Don't look so astonished. I don't mean we're going to the moon. We're not going up. We're going down. Bill, I have something to show you. Will you take a trip with me? To Iceland? Iceland? Just the first leg. A plane to Iceland, then immediately a boat to the North Atlantic to see the foundation. The beginning of the North Atlantic Project. I'm going to have to trust you. And you're going to have to trust me. Sir. Bill swallowed. He was not usually so open with people, but he was moved by Ryan's passion and his trust. You trusted me, Governor. Right out of the Christmas cracker. And I'll trust you. Good. But you'll be giving me your point of view, Bill. Because I feel you're trustworthy. We've reached our first stop. We'll have a few words with one of our resident artists here, and then we're taking a very late plane to see the North Atlantic Project. I'm going to show you a marvel taking place southwest of Iceland, and I promise you will be Enraptured. Driving a delivery truck later that night, Gorlin spotted the small, discreet sign on the warehouse front, Seaworthy Construction. He drove around the corner and pulled up near the loading dock. Even this time of night, the place was a hive of activity, one shift clocking out and another one clocking right in. Gorland turned off the engine and adjusted his stomach padding. Hiring a delivery truck was easy. Coming up with a new disguise had used up another hour. He got the delivery service coveralls, stuffed a pillow in them for a big belly, gave himself a scar and rearranged the toupee. Most of all, he rearranged his facial expression, made it the expression of a bored wiseacre.
"Hey, how you doing?"
Gorland said to himself in the rearview mirror. He made the voice a little higher. He didn't want anyone recognizing Frank Gorland. He was now Bill Foster, delivery driver, because Bill Foster happened to be the name sewn onto the overalls. He looked over the clipboard that the driver of his borrowed truck had left on the dash. Heinz Canned Goods, it said. That'd work. The truck was empty. The stuff had already been delivered somewhere, but the warehouse didn't need to know that. Gorland climbed down from the truck and stalked over to the loading dock, acting like he was in a hurry to get the delivery over with. He went up the steps like he owned the place. Big steel doors in the warehouse were wide open, and inside a whole separate crew bustled and grunted about crates and pallets, supporting intricate steel equipment, and the likes of which he'd never seen before. A sign over the doors, bigger than the business sign out front, read, "Authorized personnel only." A grumpy-looking man in a long coat, horn-rimmed glasses, and a patch of mustache was supervising a crew of 8 men offloading a truck back to the loading dock. Maybe the biggest truck Gorland had ever seen. Gorland watched for a minute as a hefty wooden crate was swung with a block and tackle, several men wrestling it into place on a wheeled pallet. Some other crates in the back of the truck looked big enough to hold a small car. Stenciled on one of the crates was, "Design facing Building 4. "You!" barked the man in the horn rims. He scowled, not seeming happy to find Gorland staring into the back of the big truck. "What do you want here?" Gorland meditatively chewed a wooden match and considered the question. Then he hooked a thumb at the truck he'd driven here. "Got a delivery for Ryan." He flashed the clipboard he'd brought along. "Canned goods." The man turned to shout, "Careful with that," at 2 burly workmen, then turned back to Gorland. "Canned goods? They'll be glad to hear that out at the site, second we get this truck unloaded. You back yours up here." "Hold on now," Gorland said, furiously chewing at his toothpick. "This here delivery is for a man named Ryan. You him?" The man snorted in contempt. "Don't be a fool. Mr. Ryan doesn't come here in person. I'm Harry Brown. I sign for everything." Gorland shrugged and turned away. "Says here, Mr. Ryan. I don't have no other instructions." "Now wait a minute, hold on." Brown stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "They go through food out there like there's no tomorrow. We got word from Rizzo yesterday that we had to step up on the canned goods." "Fine," Gorland said, chewing his match. "Then get me, Mr. He paused to squint at his clipboard as if it was written on there. "Mr. Andrew Ryan out here to sign for it." "Look," Brown seemed to be working hard to hold on to his temper. "You know who Andrew Ryan is?" "I heard of him. Some big muckety-muck. I don't care if he's Harry Truman. My instructions say he's got to sign or no delivery. Hell, I'll come back tomorrow. It's just a truckload of canned food." "We've got a ship coming in tonight, and they need those goods. They've got an army of men out there to feed." "So why don't they buy him something to eat local wherever that is, till we get this straightened out?" Gorland asked, as if innocently amused. "They don't have a corner grocery out there?" "No, you tubby fool. It's off the coast of Iceland, and if he buys in Iceland, then—" He broke off, frowning. Gorland scratched his head as if trying to puzzle it out. "Well, maybe I can get you to have this truckload. How many men he got out there? 1 truckload gonna be enough? Maybe you want us to send out another?" "Hell, we could probably use 3 more. "Costs more to get it out here that quick. He give you guys enough budget for that?" "Enough budget?" Brown snorted and crossed his arms over his chest. "If you only knew what we spent on the air pumps already. Money's what they call it. No object, you get it. Now get that truck up here.
I don't know, this whole thing, how do I know it's on the up and up if the guy who ordered it ain't here to sign? Who's in charge at Seaworthy if it isn't Ryan?
Ryan's the owner, you damned. He took a deep breath, removed his glasses, polished them with a handkerchief. That seemed to calm him. Ryan's the owner. A man named Rizzo over at the administration office. He's in charge. Brown turned to sign a manifest held up for him by a thick-set black man in overalls. All he could gather was air purification system, building 32 and 33. And the cost of that system added up to well over $1 million. Brown saw Gorlin trying to see the manifest and stepped to block his view.
Mister, you sure are a nosy sort.
Gorlin shrugged. Just as curious as anybody else. Well, I can't let you sign for this stuff. Where's this Rizzo's office at? Maybe I better talk to him.
Brown hesitated, looking at him suspiciously. Then he shrugged and told him, and Gorlin wrote it down on the clipboard. He turned to peer inside the warehouse.
Hey, that one of them bathysphere things?
Brown stared at him.
What delivery company you say you were with?
Me? Acme. Name's Foster.
Yeah, let me have another look at that clipboard of yours.
Now who's the nosy one? See you when I get the signature, pal.
Gorland turned and hurried down the stairs. He felt the man on the loading dock staring at him. He glanced back and saw one big fist-faced palooka take a sap out of his pocket and slap it in his palm. He hurried to the truck, forcing himself not to run, and got out of there as fast as he could, smiling to himself as he drove away. Maybe this wasn't going to be a blackmail operation. Maybe it'd be something much bigger. Yeah, if he figured out where to stand, it'd be raining money, and all he needed was a bucket.
It's not generally known that I sometimes back Broadway musicals, said Andrew Ryan, as the limousine pulled up in front of the theater. I prefer to do it quietly. I have a rather old-fashioned taste in music, they tell me. George M. Cohen, or Jolson, they're more my style. Or Rudy Vallejo. I don't care much for this jitterbug business. Don't understand it.
He waved a hand at the marquee.
You know the work of Sandra Cohen? Some say he's getting a bit long in the tooth, but I think he's every bit the musical genius he ever was. A Renaissance man of the arts, really.
Bill read the marquee. Sandra Cohen in Young Dandies.
Goh,
he burst out.
Me more took a liking to Sandra Cohen a few years back. Fair wore out his kissing the tulip on her old Victrola.
Ah, yes, I was a fan of his No One Understands Me. You shall meet him tonight, my boy. We're just in time to catch his final number. I've seen the show many times, of course, and we'll have a word backstage. Karlowski, this is fine here.
The chauffeur, Ivan Karlowski, was a pale-haired man, scarred and impassive, with a distinctively Russian bone structure. He gave a small salute with his gloved hand and nodded. Bill had heard that Karlowski was not only one of the finest auto mechanics around, but also pretty much invincible. No one messed with Karlowski. Bill got out of the limo, instinctively holding the door for Ryan and closing it behind him. A group of swells spilled out of the theater, laughing, though the music of the show could still be heard through the open theater door. The show was still going on. A bored-looking man in spats and a tuxedo was escorting a platinum-haired girl in a white mink. Two other young men followed, with elaborately coiffed girls on their arms, all of them tipsy from intermission cocktails. Bill hesitated as Ryan paused, glowering at the swells, seeming to disapprove of them leaving the theater early. "Say," laughed one in a top hat, "that Sandra Cohen is a funny old character. I heard some young men go into his dressing room. Never come out again," said a sleepy-eyed swell in a bowler hat, more seriously, voice low. "Well, he won't get me to one of his shows again," said the top hat as they strolled wobbling off. "Mincing about like that, constantly in the spotlight, all that makeup, he looked like a clown." Ryan growled audibly to himself as he glared after them. "Drunks." He shook his head, stalking towards the alley between the theaters that led to the stage door. Bill followed, feeling a bit squiffy himself, though he hadn't had a drop today. He felt socially out of his depth with Ryan, but this whole experience exhilarated him too.
"This way, Bill," Ryan muttered. "Those decadent young poltroons. But it's ever that way. Inconsequential people know only mockery. Only the great understand the great."
He rapped on the stage door, which was opened by a cigar-chewing bulldog of a man.
"Well, who's it now?"
And then his cigar dropped from his slack mouth.
"Oh, sorry, Mr. Ryan. I didn't realize it was you. Please come in, sir. Right this way, sir. Nice night, ain't it?"
What an ass kisser, Bill thought, as the man, practically curtsying, let them in. An echoing passage, and then they were backstage, standing in the wings, watching Sandra Cohen. He was just finishing off his climactic number, Hop Away to Heaven. Strange to see a stage show from this angle, everything looking oddly overlit. The clack of the heels on the wooden stage audible, the extreme angle not showing the dancers to best effect. They seemed to almost lumber around. And Sandra Cohen was stranger still. The fading Broadway star was wearing a silvery jacket that might have seemed more natural on a Bubsy Berkeley dancing girl. He had matching silvery trousers with a red stripe down the side. His boots, with heels like a flamingo dancer's, glittered too. He had a rather bulbous head, with thinning hair emphasized by a great pale swath of forehead, not much helped by a spit curl, and a puckish little mustache upturned at its ends. He did wear a surprising amount of pancake, and what seemed to be eyeliner. Cohen was sashaying rhythmically about, singing in a jaunty tenor and spinning a silvery walking stick in his fingertips. 2 rows of very handsome young men and pretty girls danced in chorus patterns behind him as he sang.
"Admittedly, this is a trivial number," said Ryan,
leaning over to whisper behind his hand to Bill.
"but the public needs that sort of thing, something light from time to time. Sandra would like to be more serious. Artists should have their chance to work without interference, so long as it's profitable, of course."
Bill nodded, hoping that this blighter did have some better numbers than this rubbish. He wouldn't have pictured Ryan listening to this prancing chap, would have thought him more a Wagner type, or maybe Tchaikovsky. But then, you never knew what kind of music a man might relax with. He'd once known a bare-fisted bruiser of a longshoreman, who thought nothing of taking 3 men in a bar fight, but burst into sentimental tears when he saw Shirley Temple singing The Good Ship Lollipop, wiping his eyes, sniffing.
"Ain't she a pip?"
The curtain rang down to a rather puny spatter of applause, and went back up almost immediately so that Cohen could take several bows that no one was asking for. The dancers hurried off stage. A gesture from Ryan, and one of the dancers lingered. A corn-fed chorus girl in a bathing suit trimmed in white fur. A great flowing spill of blonde hair fell over her pink shoulders. Golden bangs stuck to her forehead in a light sheen of perspiration. She was a big girl, in an Amazonian voluptuous kind of way, and seemed several inches taller than Ryan, but almost shrank in his presence, while her china blue eyes grew large.
"Mr. Ryan!"
Her voice was not melodious. It was rather squeakily grating to Bill. He hoped she was a good dancer. Ryan gazed at her benevolently, but with a hungry light in his hard eyes. Then the hunger was somehow folded away, and he seemed almost paternal, carefully reserved.
"You positively glowed with talent tonight, Jasmine," Ryan said. Allow me to present my business associate, Mr. Bill McDonough."
She barely glanced at Bill.
"Did you really think I was good, Mr. Ryan? You could see me out there?"
"Of course, my dear. I've watched you dance many times. You're always stimulating."
"Enough for a lead? I can't seem to get anywhere in this business, Mr. Ryan. I mean, I got here, but I can't get any further than the chorus. I've tried to talk to Sander, but he doesn't seem interested in me. He's so involved with his, what does he call them, his protégés."
"A big talent like yours will pop out in good time, Jasmine. Don't you worry,"
Ryan said, as the curtain closed on another uncalled-for bow by Sandra Cohen.
"Do you really think so, Mr. Ryan? I mean, if you wanted to."
"In fact," Ryan interrupted with such authority that her voice cut off, mid-squeak,
I'm going to help you. I'm going to pay for you to take elocution lessons. Your only weakness as an artist is, shall we call it, vocal presentation. And I took such lessons myself once. You'll sound differently, and people will look at you differently.
Elocution. Sure, I know what that is.
She seemed a bit frustrated, though. It appeared that improving her elocution wasn't what she'd had in mind.
I'm founding a new community, he said, glancing about them. In another place, some distance away. You might call it a resort, in a sense. It will take a while to complete, but given the right dedication, you could work there, in show business. It would definitely be a new start.
Where will it be exactly?
Oh, foreign places, you know.
Like Bermuda?
Well, more or less. Ah, Sander.
Oh, a resort, that'd be swell,
she said, walking away but looking at him as she went so that she almost collided with Sandra Cohen. Do excuse me, my dear, Cohen muttered with a forced smile. Cohen brightened when he saw Ryan, putting on a completely different aspect, beaming, one eyebrow arched. Andrew, my dear fellow, you caught the show after all.
We have been standing here entranced. Allow me to introduce you to Bill McDonough.
Bill, eh? Cohen scrutinized him with sleepy eyes. Earthy.
Right you are, said Bill. Keep the old feet on the ground, me.
And British. How charming. You know, just the other day I was saying to Noel Coward. He went into some lengthy anecdote, much of which was lost in the buzz of the backstage bustle, but it seemed to be something about Coward's rather embarrassing admiration for Cohen. One wishes he wouldn't fawn so. Bill noticed that Cohen's left eyebrow seemed permanently cocked, stuck higher than the other, never going down, as if he'd been paralyzed in a condition of irony.
You're a real artist, not just a cocktail wit like Noel Coward, Ryan said. It's only natural the man should be overwhelmed.
You are too good, Andrew. It bothered Bill hearing this man call Mr. Ryan by his first name. Didn't seem right somehow. He took a step back, feeling that Cohen was standing rather too near to him. Andrew, can I expect you at my little opening in the village? Ryan frowned.
Opening?
Did you not receive the invitation? I shall have to positively flay my personal assistant alive. I have a bit of a gallery show at the Verlaine Club, my new obsession, an art form almost unknown in America. Looking sleepy-eyed again, he turned to explain to Bill. It's a tableau vivant show.
Ah, yes, Ryan said to Bill. Tableau vivant, it's a French artistic tradition. They pose people on stage, in different ways, to represent scenes from history or drama. They stand there in costume, almost like sculptures.
Precisely, Cohen crowed, clapping his hands together with delight. Living sculptures in a way. In this case, they are representing scenes from the life of the Roman Emperor, Caligula.
Sounds fascinating, Ryan said, frowning slightly. Caligula. Well.
My protégés. Such artistic courage, they stand there, posed in a state of near undress in a cold room, minute after minute, as if frozen in place. He tossed his head like a stallion and whispered, They're in fierce competition to please me. Oh, how hard they work at it, but art calls for agony of self-sacrifice, for submission, an inverted immolation upon its altar.
That's what I admire about you, Sander, Ryan said. Your complete devotion to your art, no matter what anyone thinks. You are yourself completely. That's essential to art, it seems to me. Expressing one's true self.
But it seemed to Bill that whatever Sandra Cohen really was, it was all hidden away, even as he presented another side of himself to the world with great verve. It was like there was a scared little animal looking out of his sleepy eyes. And yet he spoke with flourishes, moved with striking dynamism, a queer sort of duck.
I may be out of the country for your opening, I'm afraid, Ryan was saying. But I was just telling Jasmine.
Oh, Jasmine, Cohen shrugged dismissively.
She does have her charms, believe me. I understand, but Andrew, I'm told that this show may close rather sooner than we expected. Dandy's was to be my re-emergence, my metamorphosis, and the cocoon I find is rather constricting and may squeeze me out too soon. He hugged himself tight, seemed to writhe in his own hug as he said, I feel positively squeezed. Artists chafe at constraint, Ryan said, nodding sympathetically. Don't worry about the show. Broadway will soon be old hat. We'll create our own venue for genius, Sander.
Really? And with what sort of scope? A large audience?
You'll see. As for scope, well, there will be plenty of people to appreciate you there. Almost a captive audience, in a way.
Oh, nothing I like better than a captive audience. But I must away. I see Jimmy signaling desperately to me from the dressing room. Do keep me informed as to this new project, Andrew.
You will be among the first to know when it's ready, Sander. It will take some time on your part, Ryan smiled crookedly. But if you take the leap, you'll find yourself immersed in something beautiful.
They watched Sandra Cohen strutting off towards the dressing rooms. It seemed to Bill that Cohen was off his trolley, but Ryan was right. Genius was eccentric. As if guessing his thoughts, Ryan said,
Yes, Bill, he can be outrageous, exasperating, but all the great ones hurt the eyes and burn the ears a little bit. He calls himself the Napoleon of mime sometimes, and so he is when he's miming. Come along, Bill. We're off to the airport if you're quite ready to go. Or are you having second thoughts?
Bill grinned. No, me, sir. I'm in. A to Z. I'm driving in at the deep end. Mr. Ryan.